I got the camera started. I had a question from a friend of mine on the weaving technique I use called Raw+1, and this is the technique that was taught to me by a guy named John Morris about 18 years ago or so. And he sat down with me and he said, listen, there's a faster way to do everything. It's called Raw+1, or at least this is the way we do it. Not sure if he coined the name, I coined the name, other people coined the name, where it came from. But the basic idea behind the weaving technique is every time we are adding to a unit, to reduce the number of times that we're picking a ring out of the bin by hand, by fingers, we grab an extra ring on each iteration. And this technique works with a wide variety of weaves. Now, those of us that do sheet weaves or large amounts of very linear chain, it can save us a lot of time. It's not necessarily the type of thing you can do with pendants necessarily, although you can adapt the technique to some cases. Where rings are very tightly seated in weaves, it's difficult to do the true Raw+1. You kind of can do a modified version of it. Generally, if you've got a little bit of wiggle room, which is usually what you've got with some sheet weaves, you can do Raw+1. So it always starts with an open ring. And what I got here tonight is I've got some very old 16 gauge 3/8 brass. And I'm going to do some European 6-in-1 just real quick. Just to show the basic technique. Morning, Zed. Welcome to the stream. Doing well tonight. I promised somebody a video on how to do European 6-in-1 as a speed weaving trick. Using the Raw+1 technique. So I'm just about to start weaving just to show off the same trick I use, but I'm using ye old gigantic rings right now. Got some old 16 gauge 3/8 brass. So I'm just starting out a chain. So the very first thing you're doing with the European 6-in-1 is normally what you do is you would build, I guess, a 6-slit where you'd have, or 7-slit, where you'd have 3 rings on either side of a single ring. And whether you go, which way you go on the chain in terms of whether you do ribbon chain or linear chain at this point is kind of arbitrary. But instead of grabbing 6 rings, I start with 7. Because of course I'm closing the ring I just used to scoop. And then I will close each of the 6 main rings I'll need for the 7-lit, I guess you call it. It's a 5-lit for 4-in-1. And so I'm just kind of going to rip through these and close them real quick. There's a little bit of fidgetiness in the first couple of units simply because I'm flipping around trying to find the rings I haven't closed yet. And I want to make sure I keep going roughly the same direction. And once I've closed 6 of them, I've got 6 closed rings. And I've got this extra ring hanging off the top. That's my +1 in the Raw+1 technique. And that's always the ring I grab and pull off the top. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do ribbon chain, which means I'm going to create my little 7-lit, I guess, on my hand. Now, because I want to add to the top of it, now with European 4-in-1, I'd scoop 3 rings here because I want to add 2 more rings with a closed ring in European 4-in-1. Alright, and I'd have 1 extra ring. Now, European 6-in-1, do I scoop 5 rings? The answer is no, you still scoop 3. Because each unit, I'm still adding 2 closed rings and an open ring, if you want to think of it that way. I'm just going through 4 of the existing rings in the 7-lit instead of 2 like I would with European 4-in-1. So there's no real change in the weave technique from European 4-in-1 to European 6-in-1 other than the number of rings you're connecting to. The number of rings that you scoop, 3 in this case, when I'm building ribbon chain, does not change. And so as I build this ribbon chain, and I'll flip it back out to show that it's still ribbon chain. As I build this ribbon chain, I'm just building European 6-in-1 ribbon, just, 1 unit wide. And then it'll be a little fidgety for the first few units because it's going to want to twist and it's going to want to reverse. But again, I'm going to scoop 3 rings on each iteration. And I'm going to go through down through 2 and up through 2 for 6-in-1. And then I close the open ring. I close 2 of the rings I just scooped up, because those would be normally closed rings if I was doing traditional pre-opened and pre-closed rings. I got a little bit of handshake here as I just got off the elliptical, and my blood sugar is shot. But even with large rings, I can manage. And I'll just open up that ribbon chain again and flip the rings back into the correct orientation. And you can see I'm just slowly starting to build a ribbon of European 6-in-1. Again, I scoop 3 rings. There's no special trick to this other than grabbing 1 more ring than I would use normally in the weave. Now this is a pretty loose and open European 6-in-1. I deliberately picked oversized rings for this, so it's not necessarily going to make the nicest sheet when it's done, but it certainly as hell makes it very easy for people to see the rings on video. And again, I just keep making further iterations of the ribbon. And I keep scooping 3 rings. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I got rid of the 4th one with a little dip. And again, I'm going down through 2 and up through 2 on every single iteration. That's how we make 6-in-1. Now, I'm not going to extend this ribbon chain much more than a couple more units just to show you that I can do it this way. I think we'll do one more time. Again, take that last extra ring, the +1 ring. Go grab 3 rings. 1, 2, 3. We'll open up the edge of our weave, and we're going down through 2, and then up through 2, and that's another portion of the 6-in-1. At this point, I'm going to close 2 of these raw rings, I guess you can call them. They're just straight off the coil. And these are old garbage rings that I kept with who knows what. So, I'm not being particularly careful with the closures, but I don't feel anything. Alright, so you've got a standard ribbon chain at this point. Now, again, the question becomes, okay, I'm going to expand from the top edge, say, and I'm doing European 6-in-1. For the first step, what you would normally do is you'd go through 3 rings here, and then you'd have 3 additional rings closed on the top to start working your way across the sheet. Raw+1, as you're starting a row, you'll end up grabbing, when you go across the top, you'll grab 4 rings to start. Because you need the 3 hanging off the edge of the open ring, the closed ring, the now open, soon to be closed ring, and 1 extra. So I'm going to go through 3 on this edge. Alright. Close my open ring. I just spin quickly, grab 2, 1, 2. I'm being a little more careful with my closures today because my hands are shaky. 3 rings. Just like that, I've closed 3 rings. Now, I'll put this down just a second to reassure you that, yes, indeed, I am making European 6-in-1. I'll just flip the rings around a little bit. Now, at this point, we basically revert to almost the same technique in terms of number of rings we're adding as European 4-in-1. This open ring is going to pass through 5 rings, which means I need 1 more ring that I'm going to close. So I need 1 closed ring, and then I'm going to need 1 raw ring. So I'm scooping 2 to finish off this row, and that's all I do. I go, take the edge of my weave, I go down through 3, 1, 2, 3, and then up, the 5 will stay open, or 6 will, up through the last 2, close, close 1 of the 2 raw rings, open the other. Now with rings this big, it's a little bit fidgety, but again, I'm going to go scoop 3 rings. I go through 1, 2, 3, and then 2 more on the top. And what did I do wrong? I scooped 3 rings. I only needed 2. Dumb! Because I will end up opening this extra ring, and I've got an extra open ring. Or extra raw ring there. Show you the mistake. I'm half asleep. I'm exhausted. There's the screw up right there. I have an extra ring on there. So I'll open that extra ring. I scoop 2. 2 rings, ha ha ha. We go through 3. We go through 2 on the top. Close it. Nice clicky sound as we get the ring closure. Does that clicky sound come through? I hope it does. Close one of the 2 raw rings, open the other, scoop 2 rings, flip our weave open, 1, 2, 3. Yep, wrong 3. 1, 2, 3. Your 2 on the top, the last 2 on the top. Close 1. Open the other. Once again, we will scoop 2 rings, which is what we were supposed to scoop last time. Go through 3 rings, 2 on the top, and close it. And once again, we close one of the 2 rings we scooped, we open the other, and we have what is the start of a sheet of European 6-in-1. Which we'll flip the corners out, so the audience can believe me. That's European 6-in-1. Should come in clear enough. Again, starting the top of the sheet. We have 1 ring that's going to act as a connector. We'll need 3 off the top and 1 extra. So this time I scoop 4. It's 4 and 2. 4 for the start, 2 for everything else on the row. Close. Close. Man, this brass is easy to do. I could pretty much put the pliers down and do this by hand without the pliers if I was bored and stupid. These rings are so large that these are finger rings practically. So once again, we will open the extra ring. I'll drop the weave down so you can see what I've done. There should be an extra weave. Alright, so we've got 3 on the top. And again, I scoop 2 from here on out. And I'm going through 3 rings. 1, 2, 3. And then 2 on top. Close it. Lose my grip on the pliers. It's just a bad plier day. Close one of the 2 raw rings. Open the other. Look at them handshake. Every night. Scoop 2. Go through 1, 2, 3 rings. Through 1, 2 rings on the top. Close. Close the raw ring. Open the extra ring. Scoop 2. This is the time saving. Is that I always have that extra ring I need for weaving at my hands. I'm not going back to the bin to find an open ring, pulling it out of a tangle ball of open rings. And while there's a little bit of fidgetiness to spin it around my hands, even if I were pulling a raw ring or an open ring out of a bin, there'd be spinning it around getting the pliers. Here, it's all 4 fingers doing the spinning in the weave. You can actually see me spin more than one ring. I'm using the weave itself as like an extra hand. So I'm working against it as my right hand, so I don't have to put this plier down. This plier doesn't get involved with spinning the orientation of the other ring. It's always in the 4-finger. And that just brings it into line. I grab it at that point. So it's a little bit easier to get rings into position to open them than I'd say if you were picking up either a raw ring out of the bin and opening it on the fly, or if you were grabbing an open ring, say, out of a pile of pre-opened ones. Either way, you're dealing with, I've got to pick up the ring, which means I have to use thumb and forefinger at the bare minimum, right? And then look how hard it is for me to turn the ring around. I have to touch it with my other hand. I'm sure it's possible that you could pick your elbow up way off the table and grab the ring you wanted and then do that. But again, you see the time constraint. You're actually moving this arm a lot further. You're taking extra hand motion. And that's, the big reason I try and steer people away from pre-opening, especially with loose weaves, as opposed to, say, a really tight and intricate pendant design, is because if you've got the extra room in the weave, use it as that extra hand. And once again, I've scooped 2 rings. I go through 3 on the bottom, 2 on the top, close the ring. And again, watch me spin that open ring with my forefinger. I just reach down and flip it. I'm using the weave as that extra hand. So it's like having a helping hand every single time. Now here, you see me do a little bit of jog and adjust. But it's easy for me to do that because I've got it pinned in the weave, hanging on to the end of the weave. So there's a little bit of fiddliness here in terms of Raw+1, and obviously and that's how babies are made. The technique to spin that takes time and practice. The technique to scoop the right number of rings, to grab 3, 4 rings, especially with smaller fidgety weaves, is more difficult. All right, it's more difficult than if, say, you were working from a pile of pre-closed rings. It's fidgety to hold it in your hand. It requires a specific hand position. Now, I've seen people work inverted, and I've seen them do the same finger grippy thing where they hang on to it. All right, and there's a little bit of double clutching with that, but it can still work with an inverted plier grip, because I can still get down here, and I'm no good at this. But if you're one of the people who use the inverted plier grip, you can still get down there and then grab the weave again. So there's a little more time, I think, there in terms of spinning the weave around. And there's a lot of motion between getting the pliers to and from the weave. But I suppose with practice, I would hit a reset point where I'm not letting go of this with the right hand now. I'm using that as the keep it in play sort of game. I suppose I could do this way pretty consistently. I'd still want to switch hands for the scoop, right? And then start up again wherever the heck I'm going from the offhand. But I suppose I can Raw+1, and I've seen a couple of people do it this way, where I'm constantly switching the left hand. Now, I never weave this way. This is not my preferred technique, having the inverted plier. This is more like me trying to bicycle backwards. I don't know how to do this very well. So this is a little slower for me, and I'm still trying to figure out the hand motions. But for the most part, I still think you'd save time over having to grab that extra open ring. And you're keeping the weave in play. Again, it stays in your hands, it stays up off the ground. And I could see where this works. I mean, I have a lot more strength with the pliers tipped down. For those people that have done less mail or are built differently, or this is more comfortable for, there's a little less strain, I think, on my hands from inverting the plier. So I kind of see the attraction that some people have with doing it this way. I'm kind of cool with it. You certainly want a long nose plier. I don't know if a chisel tip works as well for this inverted plier. I've seen a lot of people talk about using bent nose pliers for this. And in the inverted hand, anything that gives you a wider grip across the face makes sense. When you're working tip to tip, you want a wider plier across the tip. Either way, I can work just fine with these pliers as the offhand plier. I probably couldn't do inverted with the linesman. So I'm kind of learning a little bit about the inversion technique, the inverted technique. Now, the person who practices this, Jennifer Lawrence Martinez, long may I butcher her name in stuttering, is pretty popular for the fact that she's, made a video or two and showed people how to weave this way. Now, if you're going to do this, as I've seen her do, I strongly recommend a brace on your wrist or hand, because I'm getting really close to all these veins here with that twist open. And if I was working titanium or something, I'm only going to grab one ring here because I'm just going to end this patch. If I were working titanium, there would be a little bit of concern about hurting myself. Also, I'm not crazy about having my wrist bent back this far. There's a lot of strength up here in these fingers, closing the pliers, as opposed to where my strength is down here. Again, I guess it depends where your strength is. There's definitely a rock-solid grip doing this, and I am jamming this ring all the way into the inside of the jaws of the pliers. When I work, I'm out here. This is a much better grip, but I want to counter-grind on these pliers, I think, if I'm going to do this for any length of time. Anyway, this was fun just to experiment with, just to do a little European 6-in-1, just to show it off. And I will clip out this portion of the video and send it to the friend who requested the video. And I'll give you a hint. The fact that I inverted pliers just to do the last row and talked about Jennifer Lawrence Martinez, that's who it was for. Jen, I hope that makes sense to you. And again, I admire tremendously all the work you do and the technique you teach people. And you are the number one alternate technique for people who are fighting with the harder metals. And I see why that grip makes sense. You just get more grip on it. I think it's a little awkward for me. I think I have to get my hand out too far for me to be comfortable. And I've been working one way. But in terms of, is it effective? Yeah. Hello, Evil. How you doing? Evil. Do you prefer evil